I'm real privileged to be up here in front of you guys. It's a great opportunity. I want to thank all the New Relic guys for getting us out here. And not every company has to go out and have a community presence and have a program. Realize it's a two-way street, but for sure the work you guys do to put together the user groups and the communities is a very big deal. So thank you to these guys. Let's give them another round of applause. I want to tell you a little bit about the story we have at Dealertrack and a little bit about who we are. Dealertrack is in the automotive industry. We provide end-to-end software solutions for car dealerships. The division that I work with is the digital marketing division. So we focus mostly on the consumer-driven website. So if any of you bought a car recently and you went to the website for your local dealership, that was probably us, right? We also work in the lending space and different areas, back office software for car dealerships. So we try to provide them everything they need to do business. And in an industry that's come up over the last 100 or so years, they are still finding their way into the digital space. For many of them, they're on the cutting edge. They're doing Google advertising. They're doing all these different programs. For others, they're still focused on that handshake negotiation in the parking lot, right? This is the spectrum of people that we work with. Becoming a technology-centered organization, when we had come out of the financial industry, primarily focused on lending, has been a big change for us. And as Dealertrack has grown, they've grown through a process of acquisition over the last 10 to 12 years. We have a very diverse culture within Dealertrack. It's many different engineering teams that have come together, many different platforms and stacks, everything from .NET and Java and Python to RPG, still in active development. So the story that I want to tell you guys is about my team. We were one of the acquisitions about 4 or 5 years ago. And before we were acquired by Dealertrack, we were actually competing in that space with them. And when I joined that group, had a great set of people and a great set of leaders, but they were still a startup, and they were still growing just out of that early startup phase. It was, when can we get the next contract? When can we make the next big deal? And whatever we have to do to get that next feature into production is what we do, even if it blows up on us the next morning, even if we're up till 2 in the morning trying to get things out, get things done, burning our teams out. It was chaos. It was absolute chaos. It was Wild West coding, a lot of things done in production on the fly. I think, not everyone wants to admit it, but everyone's changed that server on the fly at 2 in the morning by hand, right? It's the reality of how we actually make things successful sometimes. What we learned was how to put that into a practice, how to get better at it, start to improve little bit by little bit, and really set the tone for the teams to be able to be the ones to drive that change. Because ultimately, they're the ones that are on the front lines doing it, and when we don't give them what they need to be able to do it effectively without burning themselves out, without working all through the night, they end up, once that startup fire, it doesn't last forever. They were talking yesterday in the keynote about how you can only survive so long in that startup culture where, you're burning 7 days a week around the clock. So this is how we started. I think everyone's seen this one. This is pretty great. One of the number one things that we would do is we would ship every 2 weeks right on the dot. And every 2 weeks and 1 day, we had the fire drill day. The entire next day was spent fixing what we missed, fixing, what we didn't deploy correctly, fixing, we missed the requirement altogether, right? Because we weren't learning from what we were doing. So we made a lot of progress, we worked through a lot of stuff, and one of the first things we learned is we had to start working together. We had to start working together with our operations teams who are delivering, so that we started working hand in hand. So now, in a very harmonious situation, looks a little like this. The notion, not just that we had an operations team that we needed to work with them, because we didn't have a very large one, but we really didn't have a focus on how we were going to deliver this all the way to production, right? And we didn't have a connection with the business, right? We weren't delivering together. The only goal we were given was get the next feature, get the next contract, do the next thing, right? We were never given the directive to do it well, right? And it's a surprising thing. You think it's an assumption, right? You think, of course, I want you to do that thing and I want you to do it perfectly, right? And without the realization that that's hard and it takes practice, just like a sports player, right? They have to practice, I believe it's like they say 10,000 hours to mastery, right? We actually got into a series of releases where we actually chose to reduce the release time. We cut it down to 1 week sprints. We delivered less. There was so much overhead in our release process, and the amount of time in that 1 week sprint that we would actually get to work and deliver was not very much because we weren't good at it yet. But what we did was we practiced. We practiced delivery over and over again for about a period of 3 months, right? Forced ourselves to iterate on that and to learn from it. And we got a very generous statement from our leadership. Said, we have a scheduled maintenance window. You can break anything you want in that maintenance window if you can put it back. So we were given the permission to fail. We were encouraged to fail, to try, to experiment, and to learn from it. We put a constant focus on shipping. By iterating faster week to week, we felt the pain of what it takes to deliver, so we started putting automation into it. And this was not a time, when DevOps was a big buzzword. Ansible, Puppet, Chef, these tools weren't really around. It was whatever you could cobble together with shell scripts, right? And it really was out of pain that we decided to reduce the pain, right? We had to feel it before we would reduce it. We forced ourselves to feel it by practicing more. And at the same time that we're doing this, we are breaking stuff. Monitors are going off, alarms are going off, people are getting called in the middle of the night. There's so much noise we can't see to learn, right? So we had to put a focus on reducing the noise that's in our environment. Had to be able to actually have a quality release, put a large focus into quality. You hear a lot of talk these days, unit testing, automation testing, all this kind of testing. And how much is your test coverage? We didn't ask those questions. We asked, does it work? Does it solve the problem for the customer? We had a great team of QA. And when we started bringing them inside the team, had strong QA leadership, and we put them in the driver's seat in many ways. They were up front, working with product owners, working with the rest of the team, setting the trend, setting the field towards a focus towards quality. We shipped every 2 weeks without fail, but we most certainly didn't get every date, get every delivery. We would pull things out of the release if they weren't up to the quality standard, right? And by being able to ship faster and ship quicker, it might only delay us a day or two, and maybe we go with an extra release. But we had to be able to see what we were doing. So all of this is around a notion of delivery, right? We redefined the word delivery, and I say that as if we did that 4 years ago. We didn't sit down and have a meeting and say, oh, we're going to redefine this word. What we did was we just focused on it. And now getting to look back on that several years later, and actually now starting to work with new groups, we're realizing what it was we were doing, what it was we were learning. And what we realized is that from inception to production, delivery is everything you do in between, right? It is how whatever it is that contributes to the successful delivery of that value, that's part of the delivery mechanism. So it's a lot more than just shipping, right? So I've been talking up here a lot. I've been talking about this notion of delivery. said DevOps a few times, talked a little bit about New Relic, but I haven't really gotten into like how does this all tie together. So I'm going to take a step back a little bit. I want to look at this very concretely. Let's talk a little technology for a second. We are this group that came up, we are a .NET group, but we have Java and other languages in the platform. Talk a little bit about some of the tools and technologies we use in that stack, and then we'll bring it back around. So we made the choice to move over to GitHub. We started on Subversion. One of the biggest things that we were seeing was that no one had any visibility in the change, right? No one, unless you were another developer, knew how to go through the logs, knew how to use the tools. Tortoise was not bad, but not everyone could really suss out what's going out in this release. Moving to a GitHub model with pull requests actually got more people involved in knowing what was going on. It got more people, like QA members, involved in understanding what are we changing with this release. And we introduced Team City, as a, hey, everyone's doing this. Everyone's got to have green builds, right? What we realize is that Team City is just a tool. What was really critical about that was the notion that every single commit we built, we tested, we pushed to a dev environment. QA would test through that dev environment. We were validating over and over again the act of shipping. Just to do a build proves that the same thing that it proved on your machine, it'll probably compile, right? But to actually put it into a running environment 10 times a day, 15 times a day, gives a lot of confidence that what you're going to do on that release night really matters, right? And it's going to be accurate, it's going to work. And we started putting more focus on automated testing. Now everyone says, oh yeah, start with this great unit test suite. Build this, everything you write should have a unit test around it. The reality is we didn't know sometimes if our websites were going to come up, right? Introducing a basic slew of smoke tests using Selenium. Can I connect to the site? Can I find a car? Can I put a lead in on it? These are the things that our business cares about. We started getting that out there. I talked about practicing over and over again. We worked with tools like PowerShell to automate that deployment. Octopus deploy brought the visibility up. If anyone's never used it, Octopus is a deployment dashboard. It gives anyone the ability to do single-click deployments into an environment. The same automation we had built with PowerShell, we're just putting a pretty interface on that. And that seems like a trivial thing, but what it did is started to shift the ability of decision making to other people. On a regular basis, we knew what was in what environment, and if, for instance, a QA wanted to test this in another environment, it was now in their control to push a new build to that environment. So they were in the driver's seat of making sure that it was a quality release. And so we're pushing this stuff out on a regular basis, and without the ability to get feedback, to really know how is it working, where is it working, what is it doing, you don't know if you're succeeding. We started looking at tools like New Relic to give us some insight into what is our application doing, what is it doing in production. So we started getting more data coming in, and we had to start doing something with that data. Introduce tools like Nagios and PagerDuty, where we would monitor and alert on that information that we were getting from New Relic and from other tools, and we started talking about it. And we introduced HipChat, and you'd think, instant messaging client, not a big deal, not a big thing. One of the biggest cultural shifts we had was HipChat, right? The notion that information isn't hidden, right? We started connecting tools like PagerDuty and Nagios and New Relic directly into HipChat. Everyone could see what was going on. So I'll sum this up. We started trying to figure out what on earth we had done, right? What does it break down to? To be successful, we identified 8 traits where constant and continuous improvement meant that is how we got there. Coding, building, testing, shipping, discovering, monitoring, fortifying, going on call, taking responsibility for it, and then talking about it, learning about it. We realized that there were 3 core practices that really got us there. The notion of DevOps, eliminating waste, the dev teams going on call, taking responsibility for what they do. And this is the key part, talking about it, continually talking about it. I'm going to skip ahead just to this one slide right here, this last slide. Teams actively make regular and frequent time deciding as a train, a group of teams, how they change, improve, and grow as a group. This was the thing that underlied our culture, right? Every single week we met as an entire group and we talked about what we learned and what we wanted to change. If there's one practice that I could tell anyone to start, it would be this practice right here. Meet and talk regularly, change something, improve something every week.